Let me ask you an important question. Have you noticed your belly getting bigger even though you're not eating much more than before? Have you tried walking, cutting calories, maybe even skipping meals, yet that deep belly fat just won't go away? What I'm talking about today is visceral fat, the most dangerous fat in the human body. This is not the fat you can pinch. This is the fat that wraps around your organs, your liver, pancreas, intestines, and silently damages your health every single day. Visceral fat is strongly linked to heart disease, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, fatty liver, hormone imbalance, inflammation, and even dementia. The good news, visceral fat is also the easiest fat to lose when you do the right things. Let me show you how to lose visceral fat fast, safely, and naturally. Let's talk about the one thing that stops fat loss before it even begins. Not exercise, not age, not genetics. It's insulin. If insulin is high, your body is in storage mode, period. It does not matter how little you eat, how much you walk, or how motivated you are. As long as insulin stays elevated, visceral fat stays locked in place, especially the fat deep inside the abdomen that surrounds your organs and quietly damages your health. Insulin is a hormone released by the pancreas whenever you eat, particularly when you consume sugar and refined carbohydrates. Its job is to move glucose out of the blood and into cells. That sounds helpful, and it is. But there's a problem. When insulin is constantly elevated, the body never gets a chance to burn fat. Instead, it keeps storing it. This is why so many people say, I barely eat anything, but I can't lose belly fat. The issue is not calories alone. It's how often and how strongly insulin is being triggered throughout the day. Every time you drink a sweet beverage, eat bread, pasta, cereal, pastries, white rice, or processed snacks, insulin spikes. Every time you snack between meals, even on foods that seem healthy, you keep insulin elevated. And when insulin stays high, visceral fat becomes protected. Your body literally refuses to let it go. Here's something most people don't realize. Visceral fat is metabolically active. It produces inflammatory chemicals that worsen insulin resistance. That means the more visceral fat you have, the harder it becomes to control insulin and the harder it becomes to lose that fat. It's a vicious cycle, but the good news is this cycle can be broken quickly when insulin is lowered. The fastest way to do that is not starvation. Starving yourself raises stress hormones, which can make insulin resistance worse. The solution is strategic eating. First, sugar must go. This includes obvious sugars like candy and desserts, but also hidden sugars and sauces, juices, flavored yogurts, and so-called health foods. Sugar hits the bloodstream fast, forcing insulin to surge. One spike might not seem like much, but repeated spikes throughout the day keep the fat storage switch turned on. Next, refined carbohydrates need to be removed or dramatically reduced. White bread, pasta, crackers, baked goods, and processed grains behave like sugar in the body. They break down rapidly into glucose and raise insulin just as aggressively. Even whole grains can be a problem for people trying to lose visceral fat, especially after the age of 40 or 50 when insulin sensitivity naturally declines. Now let's talk about snacking. This is where many people unknowingly sabotage themselves. When you snack every 2 or 3 hours, insulin never gets a chance to fall. Your body stays in a constant fed state. Fat burning requires periods of low insulin. Without those periods, visceral fat cannot be accessed for fuel. When you eat a proper meal and then stop eating for several hours, insulin rises and then falls. That drop is critical. That is when your body switches from storing energy to burning it. This is why 3 solid meals, or even 2, are far more effective than grazing all day. Protein plays a key role here. Protein has the lowest insulin response of all macronutrients and creates a feeling of fullness that lasts. When meals start with protein, blood sugar rises more slowly, insulin stays lower, and cravings decrease. This makes it much easier to avoid snacking and sugar without feeling deprived. Another important point is liquid calories. Sweet drinks, fruit juices, smoothies, and even some plant-based milks spike insulin faster than solid food. The body doesn't register liquid calories the same way, so you don't feel full, but insulin still surges. Removing sweet beverages alone can dramatically lower insulin levels and shrink visceral fat. Timing also matters. Eating late at night keeps insulin elevated when your body is meant to be repairing and burning fat. This is especially harmful for visceral fat storage. Stopping food intake at least 3 hours before bedtime allows insulin to fall and growth hormone to rise, two factors that support fat loss and metabolic healing. Here's something empowering. When insulin is lowered, visceral fat responds quickly. Unlike subcutaneous fat under the skin, visceral fat is highly sensitive to hormonal changes. Once insulin drops, the body recognizes that fat as a fuel source and starts breaking it down. This is why people often notice a reduction in waist size before the scale changes. Lowering insulin also improves energy levels, mental clarity, and mood. Blood sugar becomes stable. Cravings fade. Hunger becomes predictable instead of urgent. This is not willpower, it's physiology. This is especially important as we age. After 40, 50, and beyond, muscle mass naturally declines and insulin resistance becomes more common. If insulin is not controlled, fat accumulates rapidly around the organs. But when insulin is managed properly, the body becomes surprisingly responsive again, even in the 60s and 70s. Understand this clearly. You do not need extreme diets. You do not need to count every calorie. You do not need to suffer. You need to stop telling your body to store fat all day long. Lower insulin and your body does the rest. When insulin is under control, fat loss becomes automatic. Your body shifts into balance. Visceral fat no longer has a reason to stay, and once that dangerous fat begins to disappear, everything else improves: your heart, your blood sugar, your inflammation, your energy, and your future health. Let's talk about something that almost no one connects to belly fat, yet it may be the most powerful driver of visceral fat accumulation in the human body: chronic stress. You can eat perfectly, you can exercise regularly, you can cut calories and carbohydrates, but if your stress levels remain high, your body will protect belly fat at all costs. And the reason for this comes down to one hormone, cortisol. Cortisol is known as the stress hormone. It's released by your adrenal glands whenever your body perceives danger, pressure, lack of sleep, emotional strain, or even excessive exercise. In small amounts, cortisol is helpful. It keeps you alert and ready to respond. But when cortisol stays elevated day after day, it becomes destructive, especially to your metabolism. High cortisol tells your body one thing: survival mode. And when your body believes it's under constant threat, it does not want to burn fat. Instead, it stores fat, specifically in the abdominal region deep around the organs. This is visceral fat. From a survival standpoint, storing fat near vital organs makes sense. From a health standpoint, it's extremely damaging. This is why people often say, I'm doing everything right, but my belly won't go down. What they're often missing is stress, emotional stress, financial stress, family stress, work stress, sleep deprivation, overtraining, constant stimulation. All of these raise cortisol, and cortisol directly signals the body to store visceral fat. Here's something very important. Cortisol and insulin work together. When cortisol is high, insulin resistance increases. That means blood sugar rises more easily. Insulin stays elevated longer and fat storage accelerates. This creates a powerful hormonal environment where visceral fat thrives. Lack of sleep is one of the strongest triggers of cortisol. Sleeping 5 or 6 hours a night might seem normal, but to your nervous system, it's a stressor. Poor sleep raises cortisol the next day, increases cravings for sugar and carbohydrates, and makes fat loss dramatically harder. One night of bad sleep can disrupt hormones for days. Late night eating also worsens the problem. Eating close to bedtime raises insulin when cortisol is already elevated from fatigue. This combination is especially effective at storing visceral fat. The body is tired, stressed, and flooded with fuel it doesn't need, so it stores it where it can cause the most harm. Overexercising is another hidden stressor. While movement is essential for health, too much intense exercise, especially without recovery, raises cortisol. Long cardio sessions, excessive high-intensity training, and exercising while underfed can all backfire. Instead of burning fat, the body becomes more stressed and more resistant to fat loss. Now here's the part that surprises people. Stress does not have to be emotional to raise cortisol. Constant noise, screen exposure, rushing, multitasking, and never truly resting all signal danger to the nervous system. The body doesn't know the difference between a real threat and modern life stress. It responds the same way with cortisol. When cortisol stays elevated, it also breaks down muscle tissue. Muscle loss slows metabolism, which further worsens fat gain. This is why stress management is not optional. It's essential if you want to lose visceral fat and keep it off. The solution is not to eliminate stress completely. That's unrealistic. The solution is to change how your nervous system responds to stress. One of the most powerful tools is walking. Gentle, rhythmic walking lowers cortisol, improves insulin sensitivity, and sends a signal of safety to the brain. A daily walk, especially outdoors, can dramatically reduce belly fat hormones. This is not about burning calories. It's about calming the system. Breathing is another overlooked tool. Slow nasal breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for rest and recovery. Even 5 minutes of slow breathing can lower cortisol levels and reduce fat storage signals. Sleep timing matters just as much as sleep duration. Going to bed before midnight aligns with natural circadian rhythms. This allows cortisol to fall at night and rise naturally in the morning instead of staying elevated around the clock. A consistent sleep schedule is one of the fastest ways to improve hormone balance. Sunlight exposure in the morning also helps regulate cortisol. Natural light tells your brain when the day starts, helping reset hormonal rhythms. This improves sleep quality later and reduces stress-driven fat storage. Let's talk about mindset. Constant worry, self-criticism, and fear-based thinking keep cortisol elevated even when nothing is happening physically. The body responds to thoughts as if they are real threats. Learning to slow down, be present, and reduce mental noise has a direct impact on belly fat. This is why people often lose weight on vacation without trying. They sleep better, they move gently, they're less stressed, the cortisol drops, insulin improves, and visceral fat finally becomes accessible. As we age, our tolerance for stress decreases. What we can handle in our 20s becomes harmful in our 50s and 60s. That's why stress management becomes even more important later in life. It's not weakness. It's biology. Lowering cortisol does not require complicated routines. It requires consistency, daily walking, proper sleep, less stimulation at night, gentle movement instead of punishment, moments of stillness. When cortisol comes down, the body feels safe. And when the body feels safe, it releases stored fat, especially visceral fat. This is not about relaxing more for comfort. It's about restoring hormonal balance so your body can heal. Once stress hormones are controlled, fat loss becomes natural, steady, and sustainable. Let's talk about one of the most misunderstood and underused tools for losing visceral fat: protein. Not supplements, not powders, real whole food protein. As we age, our relationship with protein changes dramatically. In our younger years, we could get away with low protein intake and still maintain muscle. After 40, 50, and especially 60, that changes. Muscle loss accelerates, metabolism slows, and fat, particularly visceral fat, becomes easier to store and harder to lose. Protein is what reverses this process. Protein is not just a building block for muscle, it is a powerful metabolic signal. When you eat enough protein, your body receives a clear message: preserve muscle, stabilize blood sugar, and burn fat. One of the biggest mistakes people make is starting their meals with carbohydrates. This causes a rapid rise in blood sugar followed by a surge in insulin. Hunger returns quickly, cravings intensify, and fat storage is triggered. When meals begin with protein, this hormonal roller coaster is dramatically reduced. Protein slows digestion. It reduces the speed at which glucose enters the bloodstream. This keeps insulin levels lower and more stable. And when insulin stays controlled, visceral fat becomes accessible for fuel. Protein also increases satiety more than any other macronutrient. It turns off hunger signals in the brain and reduces the urge to snack. This is critical because constant snacking keeps insulin elevated and blocks fat burning. When protein intake is adequate, meals naturally space themselves out, allowing insulin to fall between meals. Another powerful effect of protein is its impact on metabolism. Digesting protein requires more energy than digesting carbohydrates or fats. This is called the thermic effect of food. Simply put, your body burns more calories processing protein. Over time, this adds up and supports fat loss without conscious effort. Now let's talk about muscle. Muscle is metabolically active tissue. The more muscle you have, the more calories you burn at rest. Visceral fat thrives in low muscle environments. When muscle declines, fat storage increases, even if calorie intake doesn't change. Protein is essential for maintaining and rebuilding muscle. Without enough protein, exercise becomes less effective, recovery slows, and muscle continues to break down. This is especially important for older adults. Muscle loss is not just about appearance. It's about insulin sensitivity, balance, strength, and long-term independence. When muscle mass improves, insulin sensitivity improves. That means glucose is cleared from the blood more efficiently, insulin levels drop faster, and fat storage decreases. This is one of the most powerful indirect ways protein helps reduce visceral fat. Protein also stabilizes mood and energy. Blood sugar swings contribute to irritability, fatigue, and cravings. By smoothing out these swings, protein makes healthy habits easier to maintain. This consistency is what leads to lasting fat loss. Another important point is protein timing. Spreading protein intake evenly across meals is more effective than eating most of it at dinner. Each meal should contain a meaningful amount of protein to stimulate muscle maintenance and control appetite. Skipping protein at breakfast, for example, often leads to overeating later in the day. Let's address a common fear: protein harming the kidneys. For healthy individuals, adequate protein intake does not damage the kidneys. In fact, insufficient protein poses greater risks, including muscle loss, weakness, and metabolic decline. The key is choosing quality protein sources and staying hydrated. Whole food protein sources are ideal. Eggs, fish, poultry, lean meats, dairy, legumes, and fermented foods provide not only protein, but also vitamins and minerals that support metabolism. These foods nourish the body instead of stressing it. Plant-based proteins can be beneficial, but they often require larger portions to achieve the same effect. Combining plant proteins and ensuring adequate intake is important, especially for older adults trying to lose visceral fat. Protein also supports hormone production. Many hormones involved in fat metabolism, appetite regulation, and muscle maintenance are built from amino acids. When protein intake is low, these systems suffer. Another overlooked benefit of protein is its role in preventing muscle loss during fat loss. When people restrict calories without adequate protein, the body burns muscle along with fat. This slows metabolism and leads to weight regain. Protein protects against this by signaling the body to use fat instead. This is why higher protein diets consistently outperform low protein diets for fat loss, especially in the abdominal region. The body feels nourished, not threatened. Now let's bring this together. When protein intake is adequate, hunger decreases, insulin stabilizes, muscle is preserved, metabolism improves, and visceral fat loses its protective advantage. The body no longer needs to hold on to dangerous fat stores. This does not require perfection. It requires intention. Prioritize protein at every meal. Eat it first. Let it anchor your plate. Over time, this simple habit reshapes your metabolism, your waistline changes, your strength improves, your energy returns. Protein is not about building bulk, it's about restoring balance. And when balance returns, visceral fat naturally fades away. Let's clear up one of the biggest myths about fat loss, especially when it comes to visceral fat. More effort does not always mean better results. In fact, trying harder through extreme workouts or severe calorie restriction often does the opposite of what you want. It raises stress hormones, slows metabolism, and convinces your body to hold on to fat even more tightly. Visceral fat responds best to smart movement and properly timed eating, not punishment. First, let's talk about movement. The human body was designed to move regularly, not intensely all the time. Gentle, consistent activity sends a powerful signal to your metabolism that says everything is safe. We can burn stored energy. Walking is one of the most effective tools for reducing visceral fat. It improves insulin sensitivity, lowers cortisol, and increases fat oxidation without stressing the nervous system. You're not walking to burn calories, you're walking to change hormones 30 to 45 minutes a day, especially at a brisk but comfortable pace, can dramatically reduce abdominal fat over time. Walking also improves circulation to the abdominal organs, enhances digestion, and reduces inflammation. These effects create an internal environment where visceral fat can no longer thrive. This is why people who walk daily often lose inches from their waist, even if their weight changes slowly. Now let's discuss resistance training. You do not need heavy weights or long gym sessions. Light to moderate resistance training 2 to 3 times per week is enough to protect and rebuild muscle. Muscle preservation is critical for visceral fat loss because muscle improves insulin sensitivity and raises resting metabolic rate. When you engage muscles even briefly, you tell your body that muscle is valuable. The body responds by holding on to muscle tissue and using fat for energy. Instead, this shift is especially important after the age of 40 when muscle loss accelerates if it's not stimulated. Short bouts of movement throughout the day also matter. Sitting for long periods slows metabolism and worsens insulin resistance. Standing, stretching, or walking for a few minutes every hour helps keep blood sugar stable and reduces fat storage signals. High-intensity exercise has a place, but it is often overused. For many people, especially those under stress or over 50, frequent high-intensity workouts raise cortisol and increase appetite. This makes visceral fat loss harder, not easier. The body perceives constant intensity as a threat. Smart movement is about balance. It energizes the body instead of exhausting it. It builds resilience instead of stress. Now let's move to intermittent fasting, one of the most powerful tools for targeting visceral fat when done correctly. Intermittent fasting works because it creates periods of low insulin. When insulin drops, the body switches from storing energy to burning it. Visceral fat, which is highly sensitive to hormonal changes, becomes a primary fuel source during these low insulin windows. This does not mean skipping meals randomly or starving yourself. Fasting must be gentle and sustainable. A simple approach is time-restricted eating, consuming all meals within an 8 to 10 hour window. For example, eating between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. or 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. The most important rule is consistency. When the body knows when food is coming, stress hormones stay low. When fasting is unpredictable or excessive, cortisol rises and fat loss stalls. Stopping food intake at least 3 hours before bedtime is especially powerful. This allows insulin to fall overnight, enabling growth hormone and fat-burning processes to increase during sleep. Late night eating interrupts this natural rhythm and promotes visceral fat storage. Fasting also activates cellular repair processes. During fasting periods, the body cleans out damaged cells and improves metabolic efficiency. This reduces inflammation, which is closely linked to visceral fat accumulation. For many people, combining walking with intermittent fasting produces rapid results. Walking during a fasted state, such as in the morning before breakfast, can further enhance fat burning without stressing the body. It's important to listen to your body. Fasting should make you feel clearer and lighter, not weak or anxious. If energy drops too low, adjusting the eating window or improving meal quality often solves the problem. Another key point is that fasting works best when meals are nourishing. Breaking a fast with protein and whole foods stabilizes blood sugar and prevents insulin spikes. Fasting does not excuse poor food choices. As we age, recovery becomes just as important as activity. Rest days are not laziness. They are where adaptation happens. Smart movement includes rest, stretching, and sleep. When movement and fasting are aligned, the body enters a rhythm. Insulin falls when it should. Cortisol stays controlled. Muscle is preserved. Fat, especially visceral fat, loses its protective role. This approach is sustainable because it respects the body's biology. There is no fight, no punishment, just cooperation. Visceral fat does not respond to chaos. It responds to consistency and calm. When you move wisely and eat within a natural rhythm, the body releases what it no longer needs.